Right now, at this exact moment, your mind is running a program, not a program you chose, not a program you designed or approved or would endorse if you examined it honestly. A program assembled from the most anxious headlines you consumed this morning, the most painful memory that surfaced last night, the most cutting thing someone said to you years ago that you have never fully put down, and the low continuous hum of 1,000 unchosen thoughts moving through your consciousness, like weather through an open window. You did not ask for most of what is in your head right now, and yet it is running your life. It is making your decisions. It is shaping your relationships. It is determining what you believe is possible, what you are willing to attempt, how you respond when things go wrong, how long you carry what should have been set down long ago. It is the invisible hand behind every visible choice. And here is the question that Marcus Aurelius asked himself every single morning for the 20 years he ruled the most powerful empire in the history of the Western world. Who is running the mind? Is it you? Are you the one in the room? Are you the conscious, deliberate, awake presence making choices from a place of clarity and genuine intention? Or has something else taken the chair? Some fear, some grievance, some reflexive pattern built from old pain, and been running the operation for so long that you have forgotten it was not you? Marcus Aurelius was arguably the most powerful person on earth for 2 decades. Emperor of Rome, commander of armies, arbiter of the fates of millions. And he spent every morning of that reign writing to himself, not to anyone else, not for publication, for the practice, for the daily, unglamorous, absolutely essential work of asking the question that separates the person who is living their life from the person who is being lived by. Am I in control of my mind? Or is my mind in control of me? Stay with me, because the answer to that question changes everything. It is 161 AD. Rome, that day. 40-year-old man receives word that the Emperor Antoninus Pius has died. The succession has been arranged. The man who has spent the last 20 years preparing, studying philosophy, practicing restraint, serving faithfully in roles that required him to demonstrate the qualities of leadership, without yet possessing the title, is now Emperor of Rome. His name is Marcus Aurelius, and his first act as emperor is to insist that his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, rule alongside him as co-emperor, not because he is required to, because he believes that power should not be concentrated, that even the most virtuous person should hold authority in partnership rather than in isolation. This is not the behavior of a man drunk on power. This is the behavior of a man who has been thinking about power, what it is, what it costs, what it does to the person who holds it, for 20 years, and who has, through that thinking, built an internal discipline that the throne cannot corrupt, because it was already stronger than the throne before the throne arrived. But here is the part of Marcus Aurelius that the bronze statues and the history books do not capture, the part that only survived because of a private journal discovered centuries after his death. He struggled profoundly, daily, with the same things you and I struggle with anger, the particular, corrosive anger of a man in charge who watches people act badly and must decide, again and again, not to meet the bad behavior with punishment but with understanding. With grief, he lost multiple children during his reign, a loss that no imperial title can make bearable. With the weight of decisions that cost lives, with the loneliness of authority, with the physical agony of an illness that shadowed much of his reign. He was not a man who had achieved peace. He was a man who was practicing it. Every day, in the most difficult conditions that a human life can produce, writing to himself in the margins of military campaigns by lamplight, in a language that was not even his native tongue, in Greek, the language of philosophy, so that the thinking would be as precise as possible. The meditations were not written for you. They were written for him, as reminders, as course corrections, as the daily practice of a man who understood with absolute clarity that the greatest battle of his life was not against the Germanic tribes on the northern border or the Parthian Empire to the east. It was against his own mind. Let me describe what an uncontrolled mind actually feels like from the inside. You already know. You have been there. You may be there right now. It is the 3 a.m. thought that will not stop, the one that has played the same scenario, the argument, the failure, the imagined catastrophe, so many times that you can no longer distinguish between what actually happened and what your mind has constructed in the dark. It is the conversation you had 6 days ago that you are still having, the one where you say the perfect thing this time, the cutting response that arrives as it always does, 48 hours too late, the version where you are right and they finally understand, and the whole thing resolves the way it was supposed to. You have had that conversation 200 times. It has never happened. It will never happen, and yet the mind keeps scheduling it. It is the catastrophizing, the specific, efficient, almost impressive capacity of the human mind to take a mildly concerning piece of information and project it forward into the worst possible version of every possible future simultaneously. The medical test result, the unanswered message, the slight in the meeting. The mind takes these things and builds entire architectures of disaster from them, vivid and detailed and emotionally real, before a single fact has been established. Marcus Aurelius knew this territory. He named it with precision in the Meditations. He wrote about the mind that dwells on injury, the mind that rehearses grievance, the mind that imagines offenses that have not yet occurred. He wrote about it not as a philosopher, observing from a comfortable distance, but as a man who was actively fighting the same battles, with his own cognition that you are fighting right now. He was emperor of Rome, and he was lying awake at night processing slights from court officials. He was commanding armies, and he was catching himself ruminating on things that, in the clear light of morning, he knew were not worth a single moment of his attention. The uncontrolled mind does not discriminate by status or intelligence or achievement. It runs its programs on everyone. It respects no rank. It makes no exceptions for the virtuous or the powerful or the genuinely trying. It runs until you stop it, and stopping it requires something more demanding and more consistent than any external discipline you have ever practiced. It requires knowing what you are doing with your attention, every moment, by choice, on purpose. Here is the sentence that Marcus Aurelius wrote that has the capacity to reorganize your entire relationship with your own mind. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Read it again, not as a slogan, as a philosophical position with radical implications for how you spend every waking hour. You have power over your mind, not over the outcome of the meeting, not over whether the person you love chooses to stay, not over the economy or the diagnosis, or the decision of the board, or the behavior of the difficult person in your life who is doing exactly what they have always done and will continue to do regardless of how many hours you spend in mental conflict with them. You have power over your mind, over what you attend to, over the interpretation you place on events, over whether you respond or react, over the story you tell about what is happening and what it means and what it requires of you. This is the turning point. Not a moment of triumph, not a sudden relief from difficulty, a reorientation, a fundamental shift in where you direct your energy and attention from the vast territory of things you cannot control to the small, precise, infinitely powerful territory of your own inner life. Stoicism, the philosophy Marcus practiced, is often misunderstood as passivity, as cold detachment, as the suppression of feeling in favor of logical indifference. It is the opposite of this. Stoicism is the most demanding form of personal engagement available to a human being because it asks you to be fully present, fully feeling, fully responsive to everything that happens, and then to exercise, in the space between the event and your response, the specifically human capacity for conscious choice. The Stoics called this space the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the part of you that can observe your own thoughts without being completely identical to them, the part that can watch the anger arise and choose, in the moment before the anger becomes action, what to do with it. That space is where freedom lives, and Marcus spent 20 years of the most powerful reign in Roman history learning to live there. The first lesson: you are not your thoughts, you are the one who watches them. Marcus wrote, "The first step is to know what you are, and what you are is not the stream of thoughts moving through your consciousness. You are the awareness in which those thoughts are occurring." This distinction sounds philosophical. It is profoundly practical. Because the moment you can watch a thought without immediately fusing with it, without immediately becoming the anger or the fear or the grievance, you have created the space in which a choice becomes possible. Think about the last time you were genuinely angry. Not the mild irritation of traffic, the real thing. The hot, certain righteous anger that arrives when you have been treated unjustly or when someone has failed you in a way that feels deliberate. In that moment, are you the one who is angry or are you the anger? Is there a you observing the anger? Or has the anger temporarily become the entirety of what you are? For most people, in most moments of genuine emotional intensity, the answer is the latter. The emotion takes over. The program runs. The response happens before the choice is made. Marcus practiced otherwise. Not by suppressing the emotion. He felt everything. He wrote about grief and exhaustion and anger with raw honesty. But by learning to observe the emotion rather than become it. By building, through daily practice, the capacity to stand in the gap between stimulus and response and ask, is this reaction worthy of who I am trying to be? The second lesson, what you give your attention to is what you become. Marcus wrote, the things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul becomes dyed with the color of your thoughts. Read that again. Your soul becomes dyed with the color of your thoughts. Not stained. Dyed. The way cloth absorbs color over repeated exposure until it is no longer the cloth it was. You are being colored, continuously and cumulatively, by what you choose to attend to. This is not an abstraction. This is neuroscience. The brain literally rewires itself in the direction of its most frequent activities. The neural pathways of habitual anxiety strengthen with use. The neural pathways of habitual gratitude, habitual clarity, habitual perspective. Those strengthen too. What you practice mentally is what you become neurologically. Marcus practiced daily contemplation of three things. The view from above, the perspective that sees the individual irritation in the context of an entire life, an entire civilization, the vast sweep of time in which this moment is an almost invisible speck. The impermanence of all things, including the thing that is currently causing pain, and the common humanity of even the people who are causing him the most difficulty. These were not passive reflections. They were active interventions in the program, deliberate redirections of attention from the consuming toward the clarifying, from the small and urgent toward the large and true. What is your attention consuming right now? And is what it is consuming making you more or less capable of the life you are trying to build? The third lesson, respond, do not react. The pause is the practice. There is a moment that lasts less than a second in real time and can last a lifetime in its consequences, between what happens to you and what you do about it. Viktor Frankl called it the last of the human freedoms. Marcus Aurelius built a philosophical system around it, and both men arrived at the same understanding through entirely different experiences. Frankl in a Nazi concentration camp, Marcus in the Roman imperial court. The circumstances could not have been more different. The truth was the same. In that moment between stimulus and response, you are free, not in the grand, cosmic, everything is possible sense, but in the specific, practical, immediately applicable sense that matters most. You can choose what you do next, and the person who can consistently choose what they do next, rather than simply executing. The default program is the person who is, in the deepest sense, running their own life. Marcus writes about a man in his court who regularly provoked him, someone whose behavior was offensive, whose motivations were suspect, whose effect on the people around him was corrosive. And Marcus writes about the practice of pausing before responding, of asking himself, what would be the most virtuous response here? Not the most satisfying, not the most immediately just, the most virtuous. The pause is the practice, and the practice is built one moment at a time, in the small provocations before the large ones, so that when the genuinely important moments arrive, the ones where your response will have consequences that reach far beyond the moment itself, the capacity is already there. The fourth lesson, the obstacle is the practice. Difficulty is the curriculum. Marcus wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way, not a consolation, not the philosophical equivalent of looking on the bright side. A precise observation about the nature of a disciplined mind and its relationship to adversity. The difficult person in your life is not the obstacle to your practice of equanimity. They are the practice of equanimity. The painful circumstance is not the obstacle to your development of resilience. It is the development of resilience. Every difficulty is not interrupting your growth. It is your growth dressed in the costume of an interruption. Marcus faced plagues, wars, political betrayals, personal losses, and the physical deterioration of a body that was failing him for much of his reign. He did not experience these as interruptions to the philosophical life he was trying to live. He experienced them as the philosophical life itself, the test and the practice and the laboratory all at once. This does not mean the obstacles are not painful. They are. Marcus does not pretend otherwise. He writes about grief with an honesty that makes it clear he felt everything, but he understood that the emotion and the response to the emotion are two different things, and that the response, what he chose to do with what was happening, was always in some measure within his power. I want to take you to the last years of Marcus Aurelius's life. He is on the northern frontier, the Danube, cold, the eternal campaigns against the Germanic tribes that consumed the final decade of his reign. He is ill. He has been ill for years. The empire is stable but fragile. His son Commodus, who will eventually undo much of what Marcus built, is showing signs of the character that will define his disastrous reign. Marcus is 60 years old. His body is giving out. The campaigns are not finished, the work is not done. The empire he spent his life trying to hold together will not stay held, and he is still writing. In those final years, by lamplight, in the field with everything falling apart around him and nothing in the external world suggesting that his decades of discipline and virtue had produced the stable, just, enduring empire he had worked for, he is still writing the same kinds of things he wrote at the beginning, still practicing, still course-correcting, still asking the question, am I in control of my mind? He wrote, do not indulge in dreams of what you lack, but rather count the blessings you actually possess. He wrote, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. He wrote this in his 60s, on the frontier, in failing health, in full awareness that the perfect empire he had tried to build was not going to survive his death intact. He did not stop practicing because the external results were uncertain. The practice was not contingent on the results. The practice was the point. The control of the mind was not the means to a better empire. It was the thing worth doing in itself. The only thing ultimately that any of us ever truly have. And I want you to feel the weight of that. This man, who had more power and more responsibility than you and I will ever be asked to carry, found in the daily practice of governing his own mind the only form of freedom that the world could not take from him. You have the same access to that freedom, right now, in whatever circumstances you are carrying, in whatever difficulty is consuming you, in whatever version of the 3 in the morning thought or the replayed argument, or the fear about the future that is running its program in the background of your life. You can decide who is sitting in the chair. You can decide who runs the mind. Here is what Marcus Aurelius would ask of you, not the grand version, the practical one, tonight before you sleep, or in the first minutes of tomorrow morning before the programs of the day. Begin running and sit with your own mind for 5 minutes, not to meditate in any formal sense, not to achieve anything, just to observe. What is in there? What thoughts are running? What old grievance has set up residence? What fear is rehearsing its worst-case scenario? What version of a conversation you have already had are you having again? Observe it, without fusing with it, without immediately trying to solve it or suppress it or distract yourself from it. Just see it, the way Marcus saw it, with the clear, somewhat detached curiosity of a man who had learned to be interested in his own mind rather than at the mercy of it, and then ask the question that reorganized everything for Marcus. Is this thought useful? Not is it true, and that many true thoughts are not useful. Not is it justified, many justified grievances are not worth carrying. Is it useful? Does engaging with this thought make me more capable of the life I am trying to build? Does it make me more present, more clear, more genuinely available to the people and the work that actually matter? If it does not, you have a choice. Not to suppress the thought, not to argue with it, but to redirect attention, deliberately, to something that is useful, something that is true and useful and connected to what you are actually trying to build with the time you have been given. Marcus was not born with a controlled mind. He practiced one every morning for 2 decades, in conditions that would have given any reasonable person every justification for losing control of their thoughts entirely. He practiced because he understood something that most people spend their entire lives missing. The quality of your life is determined not primarily by what happens to you. It is determined by what you do with what happens to you in the space, the small, precious, infinitely consequential space in between the event and your response. That space is yours. It has always been yours. No circumstance, no person, no failure, no loss can take it from you. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Control your mind before it controls you. Before another day passes with the program running and the real you, the awake, present, genuinely powerful you, sitting somewhere outside the room watching it happen. Get in the room, take the chair, run the mind, starting now. If this reached the part of you that has been trying to find the chair, share it with the person you know who is being run by a program they did not choose. Subscribe for more philosophy that meets you where the real struggle is. And tell me in the comments, what is the thought that has been running your life that you are choosing, starting today, to observe rather than become?